A very good morning to all of you. And I can see.
Hello, I cannot switch on my video.
I can see
good morning.
all our stalwarts in the Tapatio Prematurity who are here, and this meeting was scheduled, in the physical meeting. Unfortunately, because of COVID, we could not have it this time, but definitely a virtual meeting will be a good occasion to present our views. This particular session I devised, and I thought that it should be different than the previous one. And the reason was that we are oft repeated, screening in retinopathy of prematurity, management, laser, and all that. Basically, the idea of this this presentation, this particular session was to encourage the young people, the younger generation, so that they get into some kind of innovative idea and do the research and take it forward. So that was the basic idea of having this session. Unlike the earlier session, which used to be a routine kind of thing. So that's all I have to say. And I think I'll ask Professor Mangad Dogra to say a few words, and then we can start. Professor Mangad Dogra, please.
Sir, you are on mute.
Yes, I'm. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Yes,
can
sir.
You hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
yes, Professor Dogra.
Yes, sir. Sir, I also welcome all to this IROP session. I think we all know each other so well, and it's good to see all of you virtually first time, at least for the AIOS. So without wasting any time, I would start with the session, and because we have a lot of things we can discuss later. So if Anil Gangwe is ready, I would like him to share his screen, and he's going to talk to us on artificial intelligence in ROP.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. I would like to thank Professor Azad, Dr. Anand for this opportunity. And it was more important for me because this gave me an opportunity to read about this topic. Otherwise, I would not have read about this topic. So with this, I think I will start. What it actually means is, what defines intelligence is our ability to adapt as per the circumstances. And what actually defines human intelligence as opposed to the instincts seen by other animals is our ability to learn, our ability to reason, problem solving, perception, and use of language to communicate between us and other. So what is actually artificial intelligence is whatever we have learned as a human, if the machine has got ability, or any machine, computer, or robo, which has performed the tasks that are commonly done with human intelligence, basically the learning, reasoning that we have been talking about. So if you see our life in current era, we are actually surrounded by artificial intelligence everywhere, and we can see the road, the Google Alexa, the autocorrection that we see in computer, and then now things like automatic cars, driverless car, the face recognition, everything is based on artificial intelligence. Coming to artificial intelligence in healthcare, actually, if we see, it has been there for years together, but it has not been highlighted that much. The simple monitors that we see, which alarm is set to ring after a certain level is reached, is also a simple example of artificial intelligence. The more advanced things that are there are like use of these glucometers, which are monitoring our blood glucose on timely basis, and they are able to inject the required dose of insulin as per the patient's blood sugar level. So these are the best example of artificial intelligence which has translated into the healthcare sector. If you see ophthalmology, the devices that we have been using, simply OCT, the OBSCAN, the topography machines, they have been filled with this data where we were able to actually see and diagnose, help the patient to achieve that diagnosis. So AI has been around us for a long time, and we are actually, so the best thing or the FDA approved thing, the IDX for detection and detection of diabetic retinopathy has been the first thing that has been approved by the FDA of United States and has become available for clinical implication without need for any primary physician. So coming to what is actually something many people may confuse actually between telemedicine and artificial intelligence in healthcare. So what is basically telemedicine is the information is gathered with the help of a machine. It is shared with an observer or expert who is sitting usually in a remote area, and the diagnosis and treatment is either offered to the patient based on the clinical judgment and expertise of the human or the ophthalmologist. What is happening in artificial intelligence is, as we have been trained in ophthalmology, the IT experts, now they are training their machines in acquiring, analyzing, interpreting the information that is being given or fed to this machine. And based on the learning, based on the experience of that machine or robot, the trained machine is now going to give a diagnosis. And the treatment or therapeutic part is to some extent done. And in ophthalmology, the therapeutic part is yet to come. So what is basically a prerequisite for ROP screening using artificial intelligence is we need to have a machine which can actually acquire the image. It will be all around revolving around a digital image for that machine to analyze, to have a data and to reach at the diagnosis. So to have a digital imaging technology is a must. Without that, we won't be able to go ahead using AI in ROP screening. If you see evolution of artificial intelligence in ROP, it has been there, talk has been there around last decade, but most of the research that we see in ROP screening and artificial intelligence, they have been in last 4 to 5 years. There has been significant publication which has actually focused on this issue. And if you see, most of the literature or most of the publications are usually from United States and universities from United States. Even India is a second ranker in this publication. However, most of our publications are related to the biomedical research and technology, and some of them has been in the medical scientific journal as well. So coming to ROP screening and artificial intelligence, if you see the evolution, we initially used to screen with ophthalmoscope, then came the digital wide field imaging. And after that, around in 2007, 2008, people developed the manual and semi-automated tools, which are actually based on the dilatation index, the tortuosity of blood vessel. So what these were different tools that were used by the machine and were dependent upon the expert opinion to come to the conclusion. However, with evolution, they have now trained their machines. They are coming with a support vector machine, which is another machine helping the acquisition method. Then most recently, or as the technology has advanced, newer things like machine learning, deep learning, convolutional neuronal network. These are very complex kind of technologies that most of the IT experts, they are implementing to teach or to train their machine in analyzing the data that an ROP expert or ophthalmologist is able to prove. In short, initially we used to have these kind of images, then we used to mark the retinal vessel, and based on the tortuosity or the dilatation of this vessel, the features from these vessels or fundus imaging used to be extracted, and based on that, the expert used to give comment. And what has changed over years is now based on these features or the machine using deep learning, now they are able to classify that it is a normal thing, whether it's a thing which is not very serious or it is a severe kind of ROP, and the machine is now able to reach at the diagnosis without help of an observer. So basically in diagnosing AP-ROP, there are various tools have been used. Most of them or most robust study or research methodology has been used by this imaging and informatics in ROP, retinopathy of prematurity group, and it is very much active in USA. So what they have been focusing on diagnosis of plus disease, and most of the literature now they are actually talking about diagnosis of plus disease. So there are papers and there are information where disease severity has been talked about. Now people are able to demarcate the zone 1 Now, Dr. Anand and his team were able to identify the disease severity and identify the stages in the digital imaging. So, if you see most of this literature, the sensitivity and specificity of AI or deep learning in diagnosing severe form of ROP was over 90% in almost all the studies. And if we include pre-plus disease, then the specificity and sensitivity raises up to 98%. Besides diagnosing ROP, the AI will be a helpful educational tool because it will be able to decrease the inter-individual variation in teaching and training, and can be very much helpful in designing a method which will be actually useful for accreditation of trainees, which is actually lacking right now. And if you see ROP as a therapeutic tool, right now it's far from our imagination. However, people have also used artificial intelligence to predict visual acuity and refractive outcomes after treatment. So issues with AI in ROP. Sorry, I will just conclude that there are some issues, regulatory and generalization are not possible. And in India, what we are facing is, before making it universal, we need to have improved coverage of ROP screening. We need to use tele screening in a wider field, look for low cost cameras, need to collaborate better with the IT people and develop some accreditation model for our Indian babies using Indian cameras. I was happy to see many of the publications coming from our mentors, which I was able to read, and it is showing that we are also looking forward to see using AI in ROP screening. So with that, I conclude that ROP, artificial intelligence, improve the diagnosis. However, we need to work in a substantial effort to reach, to bring it from labs and journal to the bedside. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
So you're mute.
Sir.
Dr. Dogra, you're on mute.
Very nice talk. Thank you. I think we'll move on to the next talk. And the next talk is by Sucheta. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she's going to talk again about something absolutely new, stem cells and ROP.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, Professor Azhar, Dr. Anand, and IROP Society for this opportunity. I have tried to make this topic as simple as possible. So stem cells are basically like mother cells who differentiate into different types by three mechanisms. First is they replicate themselves to form more stem cells. They can differentiate to form specialized tissue cells. And in the context of ROP, these could be vascular endothelial cells or neuronal cells. And thirdly, they can have a paracrine effect. Paracrine effect is a chemical way of communication between stem cell and an adjacent host cell, where a stem cell stimulates an adjacent host cell to start replicating without actually taking part in this process of replication. So in the context of ROP, these last two mechanisms are likely to have, potential use in the future. So in early 2000s, scientific community got initial breakthroughs by way of, acquiring retinal progenitor cells, which were identified from mouse retina as well as human fetal retina. And one of the most well-known MIO cell line or Moorfields cell line happened when they spontaneously immortalized mural cells from retina. So let me here explain what do we mean by the term spontaneous immortalization. So when a normal cell replicates, on an average 4 to 8 times it divides into more cells and dies its natural death due to aging process after these 8 divisions. Whereas in a spontaneously immortalized cell line, the cells bypass this aging process and then continue to replicate indefinitely. So these spontaneously immortalized cell lines could form a very good source of stem cell therapy for ROP in future. So why should we think of stem cell therapy for ROP? We all know that incidence of ROP has not changed significantly over the past few decades. In fact, the number of severe ROP cases are on the rise in lower and middle income countries. And all the current treatments, those are laser and anti-VEGF treatments, they are more focused on treating advanced stages of ROP. They are not free they do have adverse effects, and some of the cases, despite the adequate treatment, can have suboptimal outcomes. And none of the present treatments address the underlying pathology of ROP, which is vasocissation or phase 1 of ROP. And this is where stem cells can prove very useful. They could provide a therapeutic revascularization option of immature retina in preterm infants. So most popular models used in this research are mouse retina models, because retinal vascular developmental stages are well described in mouse models. Mouse models are easy to genetically manipulate, hence they provide as a powerful tool to study pathogenesis of ROP. And stages of vessel development in infant newborn mouse mimic those of human fetus at 16 to 20 weeks of gestational age. So in an ischemic situation, there is damage to pericytes and endothelial cells, as a result of which, vascular occlusion happens. This is the phase 1 of ROP. So potentially mesenchymal stem cells could form new pericytes and endothelial vascular cells, and can result in revascularization of the damaged retinal vessels. So these stem cells not only reduce the avascular and neovascular areas, but they also accelerate retinal nevascularization. And injection of these stem cells also inhibits inflammatory activity, which is of course a collateral benefit. In the mouse models, it was studied whether these kind of stem cell injections have long-term effect on the structure and function of the retina. And it was observed that there was no abnormal retinal structure or function observed in the injected eyes compared to control eyes at the end of 6 months after injection, which is indeed a good news for human ROP treatment in future. And one of the most useful mode of administration for stem cells in the context of ROP could be intravitreal injection of stem cells. However, animal models do have their own limitations. Animal models cannot fully simulate situation in the human. Human preterm infants usually have other complications after birth, such as bronchopulmonary dysplasia, septicemia, necrotizing enterocolitis, etc. And these coexisting morbidities are not observed in full-term newborn animals. So we are not sure whether we are really comparing, whether we are really making apple-to-apple comparison here. It has been documented that preterm infants do have circulating stem cell population in their peripheral blood, and perhaps these stem cells could play an important role in development of retinal and development of various organs such as retinal vasculature, but they could also prevent pathological formation of blood vessels. So in the clinics, we often observe that infants with zone 1 ROP are at high risk of developing severe disease and have poorer prognosis compared to those with zone 2 ROP. Therefore, restoring the retinal vasculature, which is immature, could help in preventing as well as reducing neovascularization, and this could be achieved with the help of stem cells. In the future, a few of the sources of the stem cell therapy for ROP could be as follows. The first and most ideal source would be autologous bone marrow. However, the procedure is very painful, and you cannot often carry out such procedure in a sick newborn. The next best option would be allogenic HLA matched donor, but it is not without the risk of graft rejection. I think the most easily accessible source is maternal umbilical cord blood, but its use in humans to prevent ROP needs further studies, and there are obvious ethical concerns for carrying out studies in preterm children who are often sick. And this is the most important factor in limiting the rate of speed of research in this field. So to conclude, stem cell therapy could provide preventive as well as therapeutic option for ROP in near future. Who knows, this might become a reality after a few years. But until then, I think ROP experts have to act like stem cells to produce more progenies who are competent enough to treat ROP. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thank you, Sucheta. That was a very good peep into what is coming, and that's how the program has been designed by Professor Azad. So where the future lies and what is going to be done. So I think we'll have some of us are there on the panel also. We'll have a discussion later. So we'll go to also Anand's presentation, Advances in ROP Medicine. So especially telemedicine, he's going to talk of. Anand, please.
Dr. Anand, we can see your PPT. Kindly unmute yourself.
Okay. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Azad sir, Dr. Dogra sir, and members of the IROP, all mentors in this virtual meeting. I think all of us have understood the telemedicine model for ROP. So today I'm going to focus a little more on the technological changes that we have used in our program and the relevance of doing this. For example, the medico-legal gamut that has started now with so many babies requiring screening on time and the reduced number of trained resources in this country has probably made us want to learn about outreach screening through telemedicine even more. So this program of ours is now about 14 years old, and we are now in about 125 neonatal intensive care units across the state of Karnataka. And there are several states and countries that have followed similar models. The importance of getting non-physicians or non-doctors to actually do the screening is that you have to decide right at the beginning whether this model will be a store and forward or a live session, or we have to train these technicians and imagers to actually make the diagnosis on site, even if it's initial triage. So that's how we chose to do it. And so we had levels of technicians who were trained to triage initially to decide whether it would need treatment, it would need follow-up, or it was completely normal. As technology has improved, and that was of course possible even on the RedCam, and this is the Indian camera, the Neo, we can see that we're able to image the ora serrata and even any disease close to it, which means we should be with confidence able to discharge a baby to say this is a mature retina, or there is some stage which probably needs follow-up. You can also use these telemedicine models to train people in the outreach. So someone who's new to doing treatment, they treat, they send you back the images, and you go back, mark out areas that they require to treat more, and so on. We've developed actually a 20-point score that has been published in a few articles where we actually grade these technicians to be able to do this with improving skill levels. So this slide really hasn't changed because the methodology and process hasn't. You take the camera into the rural outreach, you get these technicians or imagers to take these images, they upload them, and the viewing is done either on a smartphone or on the laptop. And we come back, in effect, between 4 and 15 minutes, the diagnosis is back at the center so that the mother is told what to do with this baby. In centers that we don't go, we place a red card, which is given out by the nurse to the mother who's delivered a preterm baby. And then they are scheduled to be screened in the closest KidROP center that we go to. As far as possible, treatment should be done in the outreach. Initially in our program, we had no collaborators. So I had to go many times, and my colleagues. But now we have, in most parts of Karnataka, people who have been trained both at our center and outside who are taking care of this treatment, and we only have to mentor them. Busy slide just to show you that there has to be a fixed timetable. Every day of the week, one has to visit the same center. And our program has been published in articles. It's important that one works from the grassroots. So if you are starting a telemedicine program, it's important to connect the dots. So you have to work with the government, and of course you have to work with the neonatologists. So these publications are our experiences with improving neonatal care, not directly by us, but by our neonatology friends who brought out checklists on how they can actually improve their neonatal care and reduce the burden of ROP itself. India is probably the first country, and to my knowledge, the only one that in their national guidelines allows telemedicine, or rather image-based screening, not just by the ophthalmologist, but also by trained technicians. And this is the CDC report on our telemedicine program, which says that if you don't really image, then you can be open to medical legal liability. I just want to touch upon some of the technological innovations. This is now almost 5-6 years old, where the Indian camera had met the FDA and CE approval. We've since published its safety and efficacy, comparing it to the RedCam. What's important here is to make a better return on investment, especially if you're investing it as an institute or a private practice, is to expand its scope. So here you can actually not only obviously image ROP, but you can certainly diagnose other conditions that are amenable both to medical and surgical treatment. And this is a universal screening. As India has moved into universal screening through the Rashtriya Bal Swasthya Karyakram, this is more relevant than ever, where we can actually use an imaging tool to screen these babies for all conditions, for all eye conditions, even if they are term and healthy. We've then, even before the pandemic, moved on to screening, or rather training these technicians online. So initially they used to spend 5 or 6 days with us, and the rest of the training is done through an online portal. So this is a male nurse about 500 kilometers from us, trying to screen a baby, and our resource people on the other side, you can see on the laptop, are correcting his posture, his technique, and then guiding him through. What's really important, and Anil touched upon this, is that if we have to integrate artificial intelligence through imaging, then there's a lot of scope, especially in our country. But before that, prediction. We have been interested in this at our institute, where we've been collecting tears of these babies and studying them for different markers, pathologic angiogenic markers. And this was recently published, where we are now in a prospective study trying to figure out at the very first screening if we have enough data to be able to predict which baby will need treatment, which baby will eventually develop disease, and which baby we can discharge much earlier. And you can imagine the impact it will have, a social impact it will have, if you can tell the mother how often and when to come. And this is the wish list that we're going to have a point of care kit, which we are going to develop for the rural areas. But image-based prediction is going a long way. As Dr. Anil said, most of the models right now look at plus disease or just image enhancement. But we've made some progress now in trying to automatically detect stage 1 and stage 2 and parts of stage 3 with some amount of good sensitivity. But integrating this into a telemedicine model is where the challenges lie. And we hope collectively we should be able to do that even faster. This is the IROP guidelines on how to screen during the COVID lockdown. This is on our website. I'm not going to go into it. But the most important thing about the outreach program which you can reach through telemedicine is the fact that you make a huge impact in trying to prevent the blindness. And the WHO formula of calculating the infant blindness, if we just look at 10 states in India that have the highest ROP burden, we'd be saving more than $100 million US worth blindness per year. And that's the impact we can make in a country like ours. Thank you once again for this opportunity.
Thank you, Anand. I think, sir, how should we go? We should go with all the presentation, or we need discussion in between. So I'm not even sure if Dr. Lingam Gopal is here. He's supposed to give a keynote address. So I don't see him logged in here. So although his name is mentioned there to give a keynote address. So I don't know, any idea, any?
I'm in the process of calling him, sir. So I'm getting in touch with him. So we can go towards the next speaker, and we can have good 15 minutes for the discussion and the questions towards the end of all the speakers.
All right. Okay. So Pramod, you want to go ahead with calling the next speakers, and please. Pramod, you are muted.
So after Anand and Dr. Ajas, we will be presenting ROP blind eye, eyeball and optic nerve according to our list, right? Ajas, sir, please.
Shall I make a presentation?
Yes, sir.
Is it coming there?
Yes, yes, we can see, sir.
Huh?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Sir, we can see the presentation.
Am I audible? And is the
yes, you are clear, sir. Your voice is clear, sir. Absolutely.
Okay. And the PowerPoint is also there?
However, the
PowerPoint is there or not?
Yes, the PowerPoint is not there in the slideshow, sir, but yes, we can see the PowerPoint here. So we can see 3 slides in one go.
Slideshow, sir.
3 slides in one.
Correct, sir.
Can you ask the admin to...
sir, I request you to on the slideshow where it would be there on the presentation itself. Yes, that is correct.
Yes, it's there. Okay. So is it okay now?
Yes, sir. We can get started with the slideshow. Yes.
Okay.
Perfect. Thank you.
So this particular presentation is basically from, the idea I had. We have a lot of patients. I think Professor Mangat Dogra and all our friends who are here, who are making presentation here, lots of these, babies, they come to us and their parents say, Dr. Sahab, the child is blind. Can we do something for this child? And, at that time, you are very much, peeved, and you are, thinking that it would have been better if we could have done something for them. Recently, there are a lot of, can we have the next slide? Next. Yes. So in the recent past, there has been 4 groundbreaking advances in the ophthalmology. And they are namely, implantable miniature lens. And this is the, which is, this is a kind of a telescope. And this, gives, a good vision and good field. And this is, the one. The second one is the retinal prosthesis, which is Argus 2 implant. All of us, we know about it. And this is, being manufactured by the second site. Can you, show the slide?
I'm sorry, sir, facing some issues, just resolving that.
Can you show the next one?
So can we go to the next one? Yes, that is visible, sir, now. Yeah.
Yes. So then the next we are coming to the, the optic nerve bypass. Basically, what I'm trying to say is in the visual pathway, if one particular site, like we have, the first is the retina, then we have the ganglion cells, and then we have the optic nerve, then we have the lateral geniculate body, and then we have the visual cortex. In this, pathway, if there is one, interface is damaged, can we, take up the next interface for the production of the image? Similarly, if the optic nerve is damaged, if the retina is damaged, and then can we, do something to give vision to the, to the patient or to the babies? And there comes the role of the, this directly stimulating the visual cortex. And there has been a recent advances in this area. And this is from the Australia Monash University, where Professor Arthur Lowry, and he has done the first human clinical trial. And this is called the Mind's Eye. Can we have the next one? Next slide, please. Yes. So what is done here is the brain visual cortex, is stimulated, and it potentially gives 25 times the resolution of the retinal transplant. You can imagine. And then it also gives you facial recognition, which is possible, and also a direction and the distance, which matters. So this has been the first clinical trial, which has been done from the Australia University, Monash University. And this gives a hope that, in the future, we can have something of visual cortex, kind of a stimulation, and we can give some vision to the, blind patient, blind babies, or whosoever has been blind. May I have the next one, please? Next, please. Can you change the next one? Yes. Then we have this bionic eye. And the bionic eye is basically, there's a quest to restore sight by sending electrical signals directly to the brain. And this has been, National Institute of Neurology with Director Peter Rockfest-Sarma. And this is electrically stimulating the brain to see. And what they do here is there's 1,024 electrodes which are wired with the visual cortex. And this gives a high definition intracortical implant, high definition intracortical implant, and this makes functionally visible vision. So can I have the next one? And then we have brain implants. And these brain implants, they are also like eye bypass. Basically, eye bypass means we are bypassing the optic nerve, we are bypassing the retina, and we are directly going on to the visual cortex. And what is done here is when we electrically stimulate the visual cortex, then there is a production of these phosphines. And these phosphines are small, small blocks of images. And if we have, thousands of phosphines are there, then we can give, a light. We can also give the shape, and we can also give the form of any object that, which is, shown, or which picture is taken. So this is a brain implant, and this is, it is a partial light that restores the partial vision to blind. And this has been done in University College of London, and this is Optegra Eye Hospital, Alexshot. By Alexshot, this is being done in Baylor Medical College, Houston, Texas, and also University of California, Los Angeles. These places, this work is already going on. And if any of our young people, or even the older people, they want to do, or the mid-level people, they want to do some work in this area, they can take up this area. This is the very, exciting area. May I have the next one, please? Can you show the next? Yes. Then we have this cortical visual prosthesis. What is done is, in the visual cortex area, V1, V2, and V3, this implant is placed there. The implant could be a subdural implant, or the implant could be over the, the visual cortex. The problem here is when there is a visual cortex implants are there, then it makes a dent in the cortex, and it can damage the surrounding tissue and create some neurological problem for the patient. So best one is the epidural, these cortical visual prosthesis. And this is the, the visual cortex acts as an interface for vision restoration. Please show the next one. So basically, this visual cortex prosthesis, as I told you, this is basically an implant which is either epidural, or this, it is a over the, the cerebral cortex. And this is, a novel visual cortical position system. This is developed by the Orion Second Sight Medical Products. And it has very recently, it has been approved on early feasibility study through its breakthrough device, and by the Nader, Portian, MD, PhD from UCLA, Southwestern California. And this is basically a miniature camera. As you can see here, is a miniature camera mounted on a pair of eyeglasses, and with an antenna and a video processing system, which is here, shown here. So this is, another, these are the 4 or 5. Can I have the next one? So basically the exciting, this future of this optic nerve regeneration or optic nerve stimulation is very exciting, and positive developments in the world in this area will definitely make blind to see due to optic nerve and retina damage in coming years. And I think this is, wonderful area to work for many of our colleagues. I would encourage them to work in this area so that India is also on the list of the, the researches which are being done in this area. So thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for absolutely futuristic kind of a talk, and which will serve as a, as you already mentioned, a stimulation to do more in this area, and which is something which looks impossible, but what you have presented appear definitely possible in future. So with this, I also wanted Dr. Narendran, is he there? If he's there, please call the next speakers, Dr. Narendran. And
thank you, sir. Now we will move on to the next talk by Dr. Subhadra Jalali, and she'll be talking on ROP training and certification.
Thank you to Indian ROP Society and all my teachers, gurus, mentors, and friends. I think any program, any machine cannot replace the human heart and the human hand. And so we may have all sorts of gadgets and best infrastructure, but if the heart and the hands are not there to use them properly, we will not achieve anything. So that is where the training and certification are extremely important, so that we have people with leadership and caring heart who can come and deliver the things that we want the machines to deliver. You can see this beautiful picture of Komal holding that baby. You can see that, that is what you want, that people who are dealing with ROP, understand the importance of caring for eyes of a newborn baby. It's a very serious thing. It has a lot of ownership and a lot of, need required. So the aim of our program is that there should not be any NICU or SNCU which does not have an ophthalmologist visiting it. By ophthalmologist could also be a technician, but then ophthalmology program has to be there in every newborn center. And so we need trained caring personnel to handle this problem. So there can be various ophthalmologists, retinal laser specialists, general ophthalmologists. In last session, somebody asked, can general ophthalmologists screen? Definitely they can screen if they are trained. Even nurses can screen. Anand showed, social worker, technician. There's so many people who can screen. And then, of course, you also need to train for ROP the neonatologists and pediatricians who will deliver quality care, because that is the only way to reduce the burden of ROP. We can't keep on lasering thousands of babies, whereas we know that there are strategies to reduce. So any program which is doing training of ROP people should include pediatrician neonatologists, where they will also train the quality care of newborns, so that the level and the severity of the disease also reduces. Then down the line, after some months and years, as we complete our acute phase treatment, we also need other people to help in, the child should get very good vision. It should go to school with the best possible vision. So you need pediatric ophthalmologists, you need low vision and rehab specialists, because there will be children who will not do so well and they need to be brought up. And then, of course, at some point, you might need expertise of neonatal anesthesiologists to handle the surgery or the pain relief and resuscitation of these babies. So these are all the human resources we should plan as leaders of how we are going to reach that level. So the education programs would, of course, include all types of things. And nowadays, the webinars and the hands-on and the online courses, the course could vary from, 2 weeks or 1 week to 3 months, depending on the pre-existing skills. So before we, enroll anybody to a program or we are delivering a program, we should always know who are the people who are attending that session, what type of people, what is their background, so that you can deliver the appropriate educational material and training. And there should be goals. For what person has come, and we should measure those before and after skills. So there will be a curriculum. So again, we don't have a very fixed curriculum. I think there's something we need to evolve. Each of our centers has evolved a certain curriculum. Under Queen Diamond Jubilee Trust also we had a curriculum, but there should be a curriculum like, I see retina fellows coming out from good institutes, but they have never done laser of ROP. And then they write to me that, madam, can we come and do 1 month hands-on training and do the lasers? Whereas in their centers, hundreds of lasers were done while they were there, but they were not given an opportunity to train. So we have to know, what all trainings they have to have. And the most important thing is also inclusive of the art of patient care, how to communicate, how to handle the difficult situations, how to handle deaths. So those have to be there, and the administrative aspects have to be taken care of. Bedside training is very important. There will be simulators, there will be online courses, but ultimately there has to be bedside training in imaging, in handling baby, in doing indirect ophthalmoscopy. And at the end of that training, the person should be able to set up a screening and treatment program in their place. Whether they do it themselves or they take help of other experts, but they should be able to set up the full program, including of all the comprehensive care there. So there has to be a monitoring of our training program, as I said, the evaluation, the exit skill evaluation, and there is what the certification comes. Currently, there is no certificate program formally by any agency. So whether we should be giving the certificates, who are we to give certificates, why we don't have certificates for other programs. So what should be the certification process and how long a person takes to reach that level, and what type of certification you are giving for what type of skill development, that has to be thought. But yes, there are exit skill competencies which can be worked up, and then you follow up and don't break your relationship with that student. Continue helping them, providing them help, but we don't still have something about the non-performers after all the effort you have made, and the person goes back but doesn't start the program, or starts it for some days and then finds something better like LASIK or FECO and just leaves that ROP there and then doesn't hand it over also to somebody. So that becomes a challenge. But fortunately for us, because ROP has emerged as such a important area, and every town and city has an ICU, the need for ROP screening, the demand has grown. So I'm very happy that at least in our country, where there are a lot of babies born, a lot of premature babies, there's a lot of experience gained by the fresh trainers and the trainees. So they are taking this up and not leaving it behind. So of course, when we are training, we need all the various equipments to train the people in various ways. The imaging is very critical. If you go to the Google, you will find so many types of cameras. You just Google ROP cameras and you will get so many cameras. So that's also very good. So depending on your economics, depending on the way that you want to handle, you can acquire a digital camera system and then use it, and then slowly you can upgrade to the next better system. But lots of systems, including iPhone-based systems, low-cost systems are available now. A plethora of them. People are also making a do-it-yourself system. So always try to do a digital imaging, at least capturing the image, because that will help you both in training and in documentation. I think my goal is that the candidate at the end of the program should be confident to treat your own child. This is Biju Raju, who treated his own child within 2 months of finishing his ROP fellowship with us. So that is the level that we want to make them an expertise. And he did not have access to anybody else. Me, Azad, we could not go there. He asked us to come to see his baby, but then he handled and treated very successfully. So that is what the level of training we should try to do. We should build the teams. We need teamwork in this program. The training should include all the team members, as I said, and different parts of them, and then put them, string them together so that the baby's red glow is at the middle of the program. And when you go to a new city, a lot of people have said that they had to really struggle to start the program. The pediatricians are not allowing them. I think there has to be a strategic way that you do it. You identify the centers, then you conduct a CME for the pediatrician and hospital staff so that they have a buy-in and they understand what is the importance. Put up the posters in the NICU waiting area, train the nurses why it is important, and then you start the program. It works much better than if you just go and you pin yourself and say, like, I want to go and screen. It will not happen. You have to build the platform for it. I think this I have been talking multiple times. I do not know how to handle this. We need to have the curriculum in various levels. I don't know, in the boards, in the exams, in the books, textbooks, various levels, the ROP has to come in, newborn screening and ROP. So this should be an agenda of IROP Society, how to get ROP into the curriculum. Thank you so much. And I think we are not counting the numbers of children, but the quality of life, which will be for lifetime when we train our students and they deliver good care right at the bedside of the babies.
Thank you, Dr. Subhadra. And we'll move on to the next talk by Dr. Karobil Lakiri, who will give us an update on the IROP Ambassador Program.
Dr. Kairobi, can you listen to us?
Can I share my screen?
Sure, ma'am, you can. Ma'am, your screen is visible to us.
It's visible, no?
Yes.
Okay. Right. Good morning, friends. I want to share with you a certain amount of activities which have gone on even in the lockdown period for the Ambassador IROP Ambassador Program. What you see here is coined by Dr. Azad himself, where in a matter of 5 minutes he coined the term ambassador, and it was his brainchild basically to train people and to spread the awareness amongst the masses. And where he says an ambassador causes awareness, it mobilizes opinion, he becomes a true messenger. He assimilates the mission and vision, sits with parents to discuss counseling, spreads the message of ROP prevention, allows willing people to join this movement. Didactic methods are used for spreading the message, organizes meetings to spread a message, and reports to me and IROP about the activities. And since he was in Mumbai on the 1st of March, he made a statement in Marathi that ambassador means Pardeshat Swatacha Deshache Pratidititva Karnara Utsa Adhikari, means somebody who spreads the messages of
slideshow mode.
Pardon?
Slides full screen mode.
Full screen mode. Okay.
Click on the play.
Just above, you have to click on the play button.
Play button.
Yes. 1 minute.
Left side, ma'am. No, left side.
Left side, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It's over there. Play button.
No, that's stop video.
It says play, ma'am.
Yeah.
Yeah, play.
No, I see only play. I don't see play button. Okay.
Yes, yeah.
Right. Now the ROP Ambassador Program, it is a need to involve optometrists, ophthalmic technicians, nurses, standard awareness of creating material, and being a zonal coordinator for all the activities. Now, these were the strategies which we had outlined 2 years back when we had met in person. That is, we were going to do this by spreading awareness amongst general practitioners, pediatricians, gynecologists, optometrists, physiotherapists, nurses, and allied healthcare workers. We were going to help this cause by causing an endorsement with the help of celebrities. We had to make it a state or nationwide initiative by involving the Ministry of Health and, if possible, spread it internationally also. Regular circulation of flyers on social media platforms, radio, TV, and in all regional languages. Distribution of posters depicting its seriousness. Conducting CMEs for groups mentioned above. Conducting webinar on awareness for general public. Standard protocol for health workers on compulsory counseling with documented logbook of the same. Standard PowerPoint for showing general public what they need to see so that they have the information. And standard scripts in different languages and circulation of animated videos. This was all that we had envisaged 2 years ago. And to start with, the kickstart was good with the first CME on ROP awareness and the ambassador program, which was attended by Dr. Azad, Dr. Vinekar, and Dr. Arun Singh. They were the invited faculty to speak. Apart from that, we had a whole plethora of pediatricians, gynecologists, therapists, all kinds of therapists, vision therapists, then physiotherapists, somebody who is doing stem cells. A lot of people were in the fray, optometrists, and even resident doctors who had pitched in to make the program very viable and robust. So this was the program that we had done on the 1st of March, after which the lockdown started. These are a few visuals from the same. There you see Anand and Dr. Azad this handing over the mementos. And this was the young ambassadors which were chosen from Mumbai to carry on. This has optometrists also in it, resident doctors as well as other doctors.
Different types of elevations which take place in the medical science.
And then the programs for awareness in the lockdown continued by asking anchors to do regular talk series for mothers and general public on social media or in the magazines. So they were doing the program for us. Now we know that there are a lot of posters which are there for ROP, of which I think Subhadra had given us a lot of posters, in the last conference to showcase. But we thought that IROP should have one of theirs, so we made a very pictorial poster, which is like self-depictory. You see it and it attracts your attention because it's colorful and it hits your eye immediately. So people feel like reading it. And this we got translated in Gujarati, Marathi, and Hindi. And then we had animated videos. We've made animated videos. I'm not going to run over the video. I'm just listing out what we have done. We've done small clippings of movies which deals with anti-VEGF injections, the stages of ROP, and this lasers for ROP. Animations which you can show your patients so that they know what we are planning to do for the child. Then we have information this for public screening, why, when, and where. Then we have presentations for doctors in case they want to use this for any of their webinars or talks. They are welcome to take it. Then we had started a program which was like we had sent a Google form all over to both the doctors who are dealing with ROP and also to optometrists. But we did not get a very good response to the Google form filling from the optometrists. There were hardly about 25 to 30 people who had responded and filled the forms. But we got a huge response from our contemporaries. I mean, they in a matter of 2 or 3 days, we had an outpouring of this data, which was coming in for people who were very eager to become ambassadors in their own cities and states to carry forward this program. So if you see the numbers that we have from different states, I'll just run this. You see major contributions coming in from Gujarat, then from Maharashtra, Karnataka about 10, and Tamil Nadu about 12, and Uttar Pradesh also 21. So this was state-wise distribution, and this was what we had listed the number of people. There were 202 people who had sort of filled in the forms and shown their eagerness to start this awareness program. So what we see with this, we infer that every person who is doing ROP in India is so charged and so passionate about this cause that they really want to become ambassadors in their particular part of the region and spread awareness for the same. And then we had made a list of senior people who are there in different states to sort of spread the awareness. But then since lockdown had come and thing was difficult, it was then the thought arose that each one, whatever contribution he or she gives, is good enough, because it's like filling a pot, boon boon se gagar bhare. So exactly like this, every person, whether it's a major contribution or whether it's a minor contribution, is an ambassador in himself. So everybody who's keen to do this is an ambassador in his place of work and in his city, and he can help this cause move further. Now, I had asked for certain contributions of people who are eager or what they have done in their things. I got entries from about 16 people. So if you see that this is like the ones who had responded, apart from the major centers like the Kidrop and the Gujrop and HV Desai, who are busy with training technicians, and they have moved forward in the second level of the of helping the telescreening program. We had people like Bangalore, Dr. Krishnamurthy, Dr. Shilpi from Ahmedabad, who's they in their own ways they have done either conducting webinars or if they have a RedCam, they have started the telemedicine service. Dr. Anupama Bapal, Dr. Pratik Mahajan, Dr. Abhijit Chatterjee from Kolkata, Supriya, who has started the Rotaract with Dr. Mohan Rajan, Diksha from PGI Chandigarh, Dr. Ruchir Mehta from Gujarat, Tanpreet Kaur from Amritsar, Somnath Chakraborty from Siliguri and West Bengal, Bhavin Patel with his other contemporaries like Rekha, Sarita and Vanisha from Gujarat, who have started these awareness programs. Santosh Agarwal, who has started his ROP screening project along with Dr. Hemant Anaspure and Dr. Ashish Holani. Dr. Alay Bankar, who already runs the Gujarat they have given the numbers that they have screened, and Alay had given a month-wise distribution because this was in response to the query that we had made that there was a dip in numbers of these children during the lockdown period, probably because the mothers were resting and there were less number of premature children born. And Dr. Prachi Agashe with Dr. Anand Subramaniam, Sarvesh Tiwari and Ashish Doshi, who have got this Neophorus camera donated to them at their institute here in Mumbai, and they have started the telescreening into hospitals of Thane and Kalwa. So these are just a few visuals to show you which people have sent. Now, to come to the last but the most interesting part is that this we had spoken about endorsement with celebrities. So in the entire lockdown period, we have been chasing one major celebrity and we have almost got through to him, but still that 10% is still remaining because he still has to give it to us, which he has promised. So this is a small clipping which I want to run.
Campaign is the first ever public awareness campaign in the world conducted by India. With the rising number of cases, the world is facing a huge burden of fighting the silent disease in premature babies who go blind for life when not screened and treated as required. "50,000 children are blind worldwide."
So this was the celebrity that we had approached, none other than Salman Khan, and we have chased him almost for 1.5 years now. We managed to get through to him and he has promised to do the video bite for us, but since the second lockdown came in, this has got stalled for another few more days because he promises to do this video bite for us sometime in the next month. So hopefully there is still a little distance between the cup and the lip, and I really hope for all of us this transpires. There is a small message which I want to give out to all our people there, because each one would know some celebrity in their zone or either know them well or know of them through somebody. Each one can approach them for a kind of small video bite which can be circulated. I have already asked Dr. Mohan Rajan to approach Mr. Rajnikant, who is a patient of his and whom he knows very well, for a video bite. We had also asked Mr. Ratan Tata, who's again dithering because he had a court case, and Rajnikant is now in the US. So in each city and state, if you can catch hold of some celebrity whose voice will be listened to by people avidly, it would make a lot of difference in our project. And this is the first ever campaign of its kind which has been done from India itself. And for this, we owe all salutations to Dr. Azad, whose brainchild it was. Thank you so much for your kind attention.
Dr. Lingam Gopal is there. Is he?
I'll just stop my screen share just a moment.
It has stopped, ma'am.
It has stopped? Okay, fine. Thank you.
Yes. So I couldn't get through Dr.
Okay.
Gopal, but administrator, there we can see one administrator. So, would you confirm?
Administrator? Yeah.
Is Dr. Ajay Kapoor.
Oh, okay. No. All right. So I think I'm going to...
I did not get the link.
So, okay.
Yeah, because maybe he is not registered. I don't know. Did he register?
Ma'am, I registered, but I still did not get the link. So,
for Dr. Gopal, I'm saying. I'm not talking about him.
No.
I think since there's no information, so we can't really.
Yes.
So what I'm going to do is I'm handing over to LA Banker for a little bit of a, you see, he's a moderator of the session, so he can make it a little interesting by asking some questions to the panel or to the speakers, but especially to the panels because I think they've been there.
Yeah, so thank you, sir, and welcome everybody for this IROP session. We've had very interesting talks by all our stalwarts, and I think I'll go the reverse way around, maybe addressing some issues by Dr. Karobi's talk on the ambassador program. I think she very nicely passed on the message and what we can all do, as Dr. Subhadra has also been saying in her talks, that I think locally, the other thing which I am trying to work is with the radio jockeys. And I think that's also a very good message. If you can, kind of catch hold of so many FM stations and just pass a 15-second message by the radio jockey, that just get your get your eyes checked. Simple as that. Simple that, because we've been hearing sort of these messages coming from various specialties in medicine, like a 10-second or a 15-second. So maybe starting with a radio jockey rather than going too expensive, because most of these messages, when we ask the TV channels, they are asking for a lot of money. So what are your thoughts? And I would put this question to the other panelists also.
I wanted to say that, Karobi, maybe it will be a good idea when Salman does that bite, yes, he throws a challenge and names 5 other actors. That is the trend, how things are moving. And then you put it on social media and he throws that challenge to 5 other people to give a message on babies. And then those 5 take it up. So it becomes a trend. We have seen this happening. So maybe if you have some media advisor and they can give you exactly what wordings we should do, and this should be under the IROP banner. And then, then we also all chip in and keep on talking with that hashtag. And then when he throws challenge to some people, like you are seeing, this is happening. So people who are more media savvy can tell you that this works.
Subhadra, we've done this thing because this is all with due permission with, I've been in conversation with Dr. Azad and Dr. Anand, and we have also formed a NOC, which we have handed them over because this we have to do it very precisely and very legally. And the thing is, that is step number 2, where he tells 5 people, because the thing is that we have been chasing him for 1.5 years through several things. We've gone to his father, we have gone to his agent, we have gone to his secretary, and we've kind of cornered him now that he is going to do it for us. So once he does it, then we can broach the next part. We have thought about it.
It should be incorporated in the same, that he gives that message.
It's very difficult. It's very difficult to get one video bite. I'm telling you, it has taken 1.5 years, and you don't know the number of phone calls I have made.
And this may be the message to all of us also. So if we come across any celebrity, if we can induce them to, put it out as a challenge on their social media handle, then it may snowball into something bigger.
Yeah, that's the reason why, ma'am, that, just to begin, instead of chasing the celebrities, maybe getting a radio jockey is slightly easier. And, you just pass on the message. So this was just one thought. I mean, if other people...
For radio, last time we had some, CEO of Radio Mirchi, whom somebody knew. And we asked him to do this for us. So immediately he did on the World Prematurity Day. And whole day it was going and we didn't have to pay a penny. So same thing, Reliance Jio did it. We talked to their CEO. He was also a patient of somebody. And he said, I cannot send it to the subscribers. because that is not legal, but I can send it to all my staff. So the Reliance Jio has so many staff members, more than 5,000 or something. So they send the message to all the staff on World Prematurity Day.
Yeah, this bite also, which he's doing it totally free for us, because we told him we don't have any money, so you have to do it for a cause.
So we have the material written, what he's going to say.
Yes,
right?
We have given that to him. Yes.
So the other issues, and I'm putting this question to everybody, like all the speakers and the panelists also, and we've heard talks by Dr. Sucheta and Dr. Azad. We still get a lot of patients, stage 5 who've already been, says, doctor, please tell us some institute or somewhere in the world where we can go and there is some research going on. But I think, Dr. Subhadra, what I am seeing now is a lot of blind patients, and we need to stress on the factor of visual rehabilitation also, going to blind schools or, schools like that. And especially in a part of the state, there is still a lack of awareness of all these institutions. So I see so many children now, they're 6 years or 7 years, and they're just sitting at home doing nothing. So I think
the ophthalmologist has a big role to play. If you start saying, kuch nahi kar sakte hain, ab ye blind hai, ab isko do, I'm so sorry, then the rehabilitation doesn't get its proper place. The rehabilitation should be promoted as a very important, positive way of life. It should not be promoted as ki ab kuch nahi ho sakta, chalo ab aapka bachcha andha hai, ab rehab mein jao. What you convey to the parents as a positive thing and positive stories about rehab and blind people achieving so many things. We recently had the first blind, Indian Foreign Service officer. I have that video on my computer, and the moment child is blind, I show it to them. I say, look, this girl is a first Foreign Service IFS officer who's blind, and she is doing her PhD. That video came from Chennai. So like that. So have those stories and give that positive message. One. Second, now our rehab is on telemedicine. People can access it, and they have linkages with all the rehab centers around the country and even outside the country. So if any of your patients want to do a teleconsult with our rehab people, or you want to direct them there, or there may be other centers also who have, so it will be good to connect and give that resource. We have helpline also. So I think what I want to convey to the ophthalmologist is that make rehab as glamorous as you make the surgery, as you make the injection. Don't make it as something which is like, the third-rate thing to be done.
So, ma'am, can we include this as part of the ambassador program? And can we have a list of all the potential blind schools which are there in the entire country? I mean, is there a way?
The blind school is not difficult, but the new thought is these children don't need to go to blind schools. Only very rarely they need to go to blind schools. Mostly under right to education, they should go to integrated normal schools. So the blind school is only one part of the program. It is not the program. The blind school is for only very limited people, and more the governments are also trying to limit the blind schools and make it more integrative, and there are various methods. So I think maybe someday we have in the IROP session a complete session on rehab, what is happening, what is the latest trends. That would be very useful.
Yeah. Alay, I'd like to say something in this regard. See, it's like this, that it's like whether a child is partially blind or completely blind, For the partially blind, you have a lot of rehabilitations and trainings where all the therapists and all, they work on the neurodevelopmental issues of the child, and they promote the child. You find children with less vision also being perfectly able to ambulate, do their work, etc. Okay. Now, gadgets are all there for the totally blind, and I have had children who are completely blind from ROP since several years now. They have done their masters, etc., and they are doing well. Only problem is that they don't get jobs, even though they say there is a quota for the blind. So that is something which we need to work on. The third thing is that these completely blind children, many times when they are young, you can send them in. There are centers for midbrain stimulations where you can send them, where these midbrain stimulations, they don't, even if a person is completely blind, they train your midbrain to take hold of visual activities and carry out your things. Means they can identify color, shape, form, what is written on any kind of file, etc., by just touching it. It's not braille. It is a midbrain stimulation, which they stimulate the pineal gland to kind of take over the activities, because in the brain there are about 30 odd channels which can take over. Like sir has mentioned about his brain prosthesis, they've all work along the similar lines, you know, because that is how you train those centers. So those are things which are alternative methods which you can offer to these people, and these are lifelines for them. So these are things also which we have to put up and propagate.
Dr. Subina, Dr. Vasumati, and Dr. Ajay, I would like you to comment on the importance of having a documentation, which Dr. Anand nicely mentioned. And I think you all agree, we have to encourage ophthalmologists or retina specialists to even learn using the phone-based camera systems, like the one I have also designed. And what are your views on that? Can you please elaborate on that?
Yeah, documentation is like very important, and we have had instances in which the hospitals, especially in the government hospitals, there was an initial reluctance on the part of the pediatricians to go in for a REDCam based screening, and we had to do double things, like we used to send the team, and also I used to go there myself and validate it. So now slowly acceptance is increasing, and also in the course of all the webinars that we conduct, we keep insisting, and to the pediatricians, we conduct some webinars for the pediatricians. So in that also we try to drive home the point that especially in this area of medico-legal problems, it's better to have a documentation, and that it is slowly becoming the gold standard of ROP diagnosis and screening. So, but still, I think we have crossed a lot of distance. Little more needs to be covered, but I'm sure that it's definitely the best thing to document each and every baby at each and every visit.
Dr. Subina?
That's what I would say, that not each and every baby whom we screen, but once we document presence of ROP, once we document that there is ROP, at that time we need to document it on our cam. That you have ROP, this is your position now, and then he's on follow-up. Type 2 ROP becoming type 1. If the patient sees it, has more confidence in the doctor. So I think that should be a part of all institutes.
Sorry to interrupt. Your handheld do-it-yourself cameras. He was talking not about the Forus.
Not REDCam.
He's asking experience of people who are using handheld iPhone-based or those cameras, and what do you think?
I think I've trained a lot of people all around Gujarat with my attachment that I have designed. And I call them to our centers, and we just for 3-4 days, and it is so easy. I mean, there's a learning curve for everything, but it's such a cheap thing. And, even if you document a staged ROP disease, that's fine. I mean, if it's a normal ROP, you need not document, but if there is a staged ROP or even a treatment warranted ROP, then I think it's going to be very, very useful, not just for a learning thing, but I think extremely important for teaching it and showing to the patients and creating awareness. And that is how you get these parents to, be very motivated for the follow-ups also.
And that can also be used for sort of universalized screening, because for universalized screening, people may not want something as expensive as Forus or something, but at least the health workers can use it for cataract.
I have seen.
That's a very good point, ma'am. We started that in all government hospitals. Once we give that attachment, we started a universal screening program now, because even the nurses can do it in the NICU.
I'm sorry to interrupt while you are speaking, but we have received a video from our keynote speaker, Dr. Gopal Lingam. So we can go forward with that?
Yes.
Thank you.
Dear friends, I would like to take this opportunity to thank the All India Ophthalmological Society for giving me this opportunity to participate in the 2021 annual conference. In this keynote address, I would like to talk briefly about retinopathy of prematurity, specifically with respect to the challenges that the developing world faces. These are the issues which will be covered in this short keynote address. To understand the burden of prematurity, one should realize that the number of premature births in this country have been estimated at around 3.5 million per year. This is according to the health portal of the Government of India. It is also seen that developing countries seem to have greater percentage of childbirths ending up premature than in the developed countries, possibly a reflection on the antenatal care and the maternal nutrition, etc. Although more preterm babies in the higher income countries survive than in the lower income countries, we still seem to find more ROP in the developing countries compared to the developed countries because of other factors. The burden of ROP on the society, and specifically with respect to the ophthalmologists, is because of many reasons. The neonatal care in this country is not uniform. We find on one end, highly sophisticated, very good neonatal units that are on par with the best in the world, all the way to places where there is no neonatologist at all for a large area of community. There is still lack of awareness among some neonatologists and pediatricians about the risk of ROP for a child who is born premature. Their concentration is on making the child better and survive, forgetting that at the same time, a screening for ROP is mandatory. We also find that in the developing countries, heavier and more mature babies seem to develop the disease because of other reasons. There are also inadequate trained personnel to screen the large number of ROP babies that are present in this country. Briefly, let me address the problem of oxygen administration, which directly or indirectly is responsible for the occurrence of retinopathy of prematurity. It has been seen that ROP was the cause of oxygen was the cause of ROP, but very rapidly people found that curtailing our oxygen leads to increased mortality even if the ROP incidence is reduced thereby. Hence, balancing between trying to make the child survive and yet not have any sequelae is a very difficult task. Currently, there is controversy between the usage of 85 to 89% SpO2 as a target oxygen saturation for the neonates in the ICU versus a higher concentration of 91 to 95%. Some studies have shown that 85 to 89% SpO2 has more risk of necrotizing enterocolitis and higher mortality, while the higher concentrations have resulted in higher risk of bronchopulmonary dysplasia and, of course, retinopathy of prematurity. There is one meta-analysis which has shown that targeting 91 to 95 not only gives better survival, but the ultimate disability, even if there's a higher incidence of ROP, is not significantly different. And hence, most neonatal units now aim at between 91 to 95% of SpO2. One should also not forget that what happens in the first few minutes or hours after birth could also have an impact on the final result for the baby in terms of ROP and bronchopulmonary dysplasia. It has been seen that in the first 10 minutes of life, administering 30% oxygen, that is something close to the room air concentration, results in less oxidative stress and inflammation and reduced risk of BPD versus giving 100% or 90% oxygen. There are also human factors which could result in higher risk of ROP because of inadequate NICU staff. There's also a difference between daytime care and nighttime care of the babies because of the reduced number of personnel available. Also, there's higher tolerance for hyperoxia during the fluctuations of hypo and hyperoxia for a neonate under care of NICU. The alarm fatigue may make some of the personnel increase the tolerant range of oxygen levels and hence inadvertently expose the infants to higher levels of oxygen than should be. All these and more could be responsible for the occurrence of increased risk of ROP in the developing countries. What about the ophthalmologist's role and how significant is the burden to screen and manage these cases. We understand that there are about 20,000 odd ophthalmologists and 1,000 plus veterinary surgeons in this country. And if we estimate 3.5 million as the load of premature babies to be examined, if all these premature babies are to be screened, each VR surgeon will probably need to see 100 babies a day. And this is assuming that these babies require only one examination. But we are all aware that each baby needs at least a minimum of 2 examinations before the baby can be declared normal, even if there is no ROP, even if there is no visible avascular retina. And those with visible avascular retina or those who develop ROP would obviously need many more examinations, irrespective of whether they need intervention or not. Hence, it's obvious that the number of personnel are not enough to take care of every premature child that is born in this country. So there is need for other mechanisms to be able to spread the capacity of care to those who cannot be reached easily, like teleophthalmology. Let us shift gears and talk about the role of laser versus anti-VEGF in the management of type 1 ROP, which is at risk of leading to retinal detachments if untreated. Laser, we know, has been the standard of care. It is destructive. We are deliberately destroying the entire avascular retina. And unlike a PRP for a diabetic retinopathy, in ROP, we literally destroy the entire retina with no space between the burns. This produces permanent field loss corresponding to the amount of retina that is destroyed. It is labor intensive. It definitely needs experience and training to be able to do comfortably under topical anesthesia. This is the very reason why in many countries, when they do laser, they do under general anesthesia. However, it has its own share of problems. Not only is it more risky than doing under topical anesthesia, but repeated treatments could become difficult. While under topical anesthesia, we can always add more laser between the burns after a week or 2. In adequately done laser, recurrences are less common. And I stress the word adequately done because it's very easy to blame laser as being the cause of persistent recurrences if proper treatment has not been done. What about anti-VEGF therapy? It is coming up as an important alternative modality of treatment. The retina is definitely not destroyed, and hence there is no field loss. It's relatively easy to administer 2 small injections with a 30-gauge needle. There is no need for general anesthesia, and even a less experienced surgeon can easily administer these medicines without undue risk to the child. It, however, requires longer follow-up. And as the child is growing up, there is more and more difficulty in properly evaluating the peripheral retina, which is where recurrences are more common. So the risk of late recurrences is an important problem with anti-VEGF therapy. And these can be missed and can lead to if undetected, retinal detachments. But to put them in the correct perspective, I believe that in zone 1 and posterior zone 2 disease, anti-VEGF therapy should be the first line of treatment. And a subsequent recurrence, which almost always occurs anteriorly to the original site of occurrence, can be treated with laser because the amount of retina we destroy now is much, much less than what it would be if laser was the primary treatment of choice.
Sorry to
interrupt the anterior zone 2 disease, I believe that both.
So taking in the time into consideration, I'm afraid that we have to end the session here because it's already 1 and the time for the next session to go. Thank you for understanding, everyone. Thank you for having you all here and listening to all your insights. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. That was very